Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Environmental Justice Practitioners Network. Our special guest tonight is Jan Booher, the director of the UU Justice Florida Climate Resilience Ministry, and I am thrilled to introduce her. My name is Allie Tharp. I'm the director of programs for UU Ministry for Earth. So, Jan, if you would mind introducing yourself and telling us a bit about your amazing work.
Okay, well, I do have a PowerPoint presentation to share with you, but I'll just say that I initially got into this work on climate in Florida because at our congregation, the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Boca Raton, John Englander, who wrote the book High Tide on Main Street, was trying out in the early days before his book was released some of his material in the pulpit on the lay-led services in the summer. And I had been very involved with raising my child and had not been particularly keeping up with things climate. And he made a very compelling case for the impacts being now, particularly in Florida. And my daughter, who was began to get very concerned about climate change, she had an app in her phone that was called the Extinct Species of the Day. And I decided that things were grave and I didn't know if I could make enough difference to turn the tides, as it were. But I sure as heck, when I'm an old lady, want to be able to look at my daughter and say, when I knew, I tried. So that's how I got involved with this, and I'll show you what this has evolved into. I began with all kinds of things in my congregation, Earth Day festivals, a SLAP poll project, which was a sea level awareness project poll about sea level rise occurring and what would be inundated at what times. I became active along with Steve Jens-Rokaw, who's on this call, with activities in our cluster that were justice activities and some of which had to do with climate. And then I got on the board of the UU Justice Florida. As a parallel strand, I was working on other justice issues before, which were affordable housing, wage theft, and so forth, through a congregation-based community organizing group that is a DART affiliate, Direct Action Research Training affiliate. So I had that training and was very involved in those campaigns, one of which was statewide. So I'm going to now share my screen with you and talk to you about what I'm doing now. All right, let's move this up here and get into the slideshow. Okay, do you see yourselves on this screen? I don't know. Maybe I can minimize that. Okay, so this is, I titled this UUJF Climate Resilience Ministry, Florida's State Action Network Dives In, because we don't really have a model for what a climate resilience ministry out of a state action network would entail, but we are finding out. So the kind of thing that you see at the top is the kind of messaging that we have for our ministry, that we are building climate resilience by building community. Because the social networks that we're building are things that we're finding out are very, very strong and do help to build resilience. So I am not able to change my slide. Why is that? Okay, let's see if I click here. Okay, if I click here, it goes. Okay, so this is about what the ministry itself actually looks like when we're in the field and so forth. These are the different locations where we've had what we call Rising Together projects. These are outreach materials that were created by the UU Congregation of Greater Naples for a Haitian Creole primarily group that was working there. They had Spanish and Creole there. And they had these lovely, colorful outreach packets. But as you can see, they're all different things. This one over here is a sustainability officer from the city of West Palm, at our final community celebration and meeting, and she had all kinds of incentives that she was handing out for people, coupons to get free toilets if their homes were older than a certain age, and all kinds of things. We had FEMA preparedness information there. This down here is in some of the lowest lying land in Shorecrest. The streets flood during the king tides, and this was a group that we trained along with people from Florida International University. This is Dr. Tiffany Troxler was one of our partners there. And these are residents in a low-income apartment where this floods out with the high tides. This is a group in Naples that was a Haitian Creole group that participated in outreach with their pastor. And this is a group in Fort Myers at their final community meeting. These folks are all individuals from local government, and we were presenting the information we had gathered by survey. This is a gentleman who was from the UU. It's called All Faiths Unitarian Congregation in Fort Myers. And these are the kinds of, we recognize the people who do outreach, and they receive these certificates at the end. So that's kind of the way we look in the field. And then this is the way we look on paper. I created some, communications tools. And I just kind of want to share with you the kind of wording that we're using. We're about building resilience, one community at a time. And the reason that we're doing that is because we're working with partnering out from individual congregations into their community. And we are working on public health impacts of climate change. So we're understanding and responding to the effects of climate change on community health and well-being. And the big thing, and you'll see it everywhere, partnering. How can you partner? So now the first thing that we do is we help congregations work in multiple stakeholder groups in the community to design what is appropriate for their community and how they're going to reach out to people. And then we educate and we survey, and we educate the people in the community to do the outreach in the community. In some cases, the people with whom we are partnering are able to train themselves off of our website materials that are available for them. In other cases, we have a training session for people in the community. And we're interested in using these projects as we work out in the community to promote dialogue about what more can we do together to improve flood and storm safety and to protect the health of the people who live there. So the outreach team training this is what a really small little picture of what it looked like up down in Fort Myers. This is our pilot program, neighborhood outreach and surveying, when we were piloting our outreach materials. And this is our latest initiative, is actually doing measurements in the field of the flooding in communities that are already flooding. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But this is why it's a ministry, because partnering with others is central to building community resilience. So all of our Rising Together projects that we do support specific recommendations of whatever the local government has come up with for their resilience plans. Typically, they will have some language, and we'll talk about that later, about supporting vulnerable communities. And typically, it is not funded. So we step in as faith partners, and all the collaboration that we can do, partner with the cities, extend their reach of being able to reach people with important data and information about what they can expect in their community, when they can expect it to flood. And then we raise up the voice from the community about their needs. And so this more recent development involves the mapping and being able to take and map data that we get in the field on our phones. It's like crowdsourced data. And then just as part of the ministry, to articulate our Unitarian Universalist values. I'm going to speak about this later as being so important for collaboration. But the use of the democratic process within our congregations is respected as a universal value with all of the partners we work with. And because we're partnering with universities, we make it very clear that one of the UU sources is the guidance of reason and the results of science. And the thing that's nice is when they go to check us out, because they're going to get involved with a faith-based group, I direct them to the places that they can find those sources. So we emphasize that because it's a faith group and all that, we want to make it clear that we use empirical observation, measurement, and surveying and data mapping and so forth. We're using the scientific method in our inquiries. And then this year is the first time, because we are a state action network, which has some wonderful capacity that some of the board members have been working on recently. So this year was the first year that I created a legislative agenda that was specific to resilience building in the state of Florida, because we think, oh, nobody's getting any legislation that's going to do any good. And the fact of the matter is, because of the hurricane season this year, there were bills that were extremely important to have that would help the vulnerable communities. So I compiled them, and then we have this SALSA targeted action alerts that we have a board member who is working on, David Johnson, and he is doing an incredible job. They can be targeted to people that are in a specific district, and they can go out to them when their particular representative or senator is sitting on a committee that has a vote that's relevant to the bills that we're concerned about. So when I went to speak to the legislators, I went to them with, these are the places where we have been doing surveys of people in low-income communities of color. And please take a look at the Union of Concerned Citizens map of the areas that are going to be experiencing like 30% flooding in various time periods, which is a little difficult to read on this screen. But I communicate the top concerns that we're hearing from people that are low income. It's very important to help give them a voice. Many of them are fearful and distrustful of government, and many of them have language issues, and our outreach is trilingual, so we're able to take their concerns and communicate them to our legislators, which I did in terms of the top concerns, the extreme weather, the property value, the insurance, the water quality. And then we're beginning to document the flooding impacts in terms of things that have some economic impact, because legislators find that very useful. Even if there are allies, they find it difficult to necessarily advocate for what's needed for climate. They're getting a lot more brave because of all the municipal governments in Florida who are struggling so hard. But in addition to the home and car damage, we're asking, how many days of work have you missed because of the flooding? Have you missed critical medical appointments because of the flooding? And trying to find out what kind of car damage they were unable to collect on, because the salt water is very hard on the cars. And then we look at, when we look at the infrastructure, we have communities that we interview, and every single person in there is experiencing flooding. And some of them, it's as low as 16% if they've had a stormwater overhaul. And that's related to the legislation, especially after the hurricane. So the affordable housing issue, resilient affordable housing, is critical. So there were bills to address these things this year, and they don't have a constituency that is pushing for them. So it's just my first year working on it, and I'll be working to try to refine it. But for example, there are bills that move nowhere in committee. The first one that I have listed here is creating a competitive grant process to fund flood mitigation projects. We are seeing that when they've done them, people have as low as 16% flooding, as opposed to 60 to 100%. So we really feel like that's an important thing. We were advocating for that. And this affordable housing bill actually was moving through committee to create the Hurricane Housing Recovery Program, so that the affordable housing will get some preferred funding after disasters. This public financing of construction projects is so important, because it is, if you're going to rebuild, you must do so to the sea level rise estimates. And then the last one, which was storm hardening, this is so important because these requests go before the Public Service Commission, which is typically not taking into account sea level rise. But here, because of the hurricanes, we have this nexus where we can think in terms of emergency services and require electric utilities that they must submit a storm hardening plan when they are petitioning for funding. So we went to Tallahassee Legislative Day. I took those communications tools. I developed, relationships with people who are working particularly on, in our state after Hurricane Irma, the governor constituted a commission, the Corcoran Committee, that put 78 recommendations forward about what we needed to do to be more resilient. And there was an entire section that was on vulnerable populations. So I was there speaking about that and developing some relationships to find out when those recommendations are going to, be drafted into legislation. So other things that I do are attend these regional conferences. So this is Irene's husband, of course everybody knows. And this is Zalala Medefris, and she works with Catalyst Miami. She partnered a little bit with what we were doing down in Miami. They have a very strong equity initiative, and this was in St. Pete, where they have this climate adaptation and resilience conference. So I just want to talk about, and this is one of these things when you're doing something and you don't have a model to go by, you just document what you're doing and see, it's like throwing spaghetti against the wall and seeing what sticks. So these are the things that I'm finding that I need to do. Grant writing, administration, meaning grant administration and grant reporting, because I'm funding so much of what I'm doing through grants because there's only just so much money to go around, and there's excellent alignment with a lot of grant funds that are available. And then what I'm doing now, before I was doing just congregation by congregation, partnering, helping them partner in the community and do projects. But I'm finding a need for creating projects that are larger in scale, that have plug-in on-ramps for congregations. So these are collaborations that I'm putting in place that I'm negotiating and talking and seeing how I can cooperate with a university and with health organizations and minority, African-American nonprofits or, Haitian nonprofits, and putting it together and then offering pieces of it to congregations where they could come in. And so these, collaboration, you'll hear many times, I'll go through this, but with nonprofits, other faith groups, government entities, community-based groups, there are just so many people to collaborate with who are active on these things, each of which bring their own resources, volunteers, and strengths to the party. So I'm still doing Rising Together projects, and the follow-on projects from these are very interesting and are kind of moving me and challenging me in areas that I'll talk about later. And then hurricane preparedness and response. This is a team we put together with, our allies. This is a representative Physicians for Social Responsibility. These folks are from the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition here. And these are some of these people are friends of who are going. And this is back behind, you see, this is a truck that before FEMA was able to come, we were sending this very well outfitted truck with water and all these other things into the Everglades with people who had chainsaws, were able to clear the roads and able to get people generators so that they could run their medical, apparatus, and so that they could have some water and some ice and so forth. So this was coordinated. I coordinated Southwest Florida needs to resources matching, and then we delivered to places in the Everglades that people couldn't get to yet. And then we were I do public speaking about the ministry to all kinds of groups around the state, and I participate in the stakeholder groups because I'm asked to do so. because the planning efforts around the state are wanting to include equity in it, and they are asking, they're very open to say, you know, how should we do this? What should we do? What's some language we can include? What kinds of things can we encourage? And then I'm also mentoring emerging coalitions and initiatives, help with governance documents, you know, their mission, their vision, their priorities, and so forth, who they can partner with. Okay, so I just wanted to spend a little time talking about how to partner. This is the largest collaboration of people of conscience going on. It is amazing how many entities are involved in this. The climate change, resilience, sustainability, emergency management nexus is what I call it, because I have overlap with all of these different things, and in different locations. It just depends on which ones have the most energy behind them and want to partner, if we can pull them on board and do something wonderful and reach another audience. So in all things, whether one is grant writing, or one is trying to pull in partners, or one is trying to speak to someone in the street who's living in a community dealing with climate change, we can express our alignment and our solidarity with people using our language from our principles and sources. And we find this language mirrored back to us from organizations of every stripe. Worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion, the democratic process, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we're a part. And these sources, when we're working with the faith community, that we have the wisdom from the world, we respect the wisdom from the world's religions, and when we're working with people from the universities and with science, and we're emphasizing the fact that one of our sources is reason and the results of science. These resonate deeply, and they resonate deeply in ways that help with funding. So I just wanted to share with you my experience with some of these government entities. The EPA funded with $30,000 our pilot program of Rising Together. Their definition of environmental justice includes this language: the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income. And it goes on to say, in the decisions that are about their environment. So we have a civic engagement model in Rising Together, where people have been coached as to what are the things that are related to climate change and health. The front page being hurricane preparedness, the back page being things like mold and other things we can talk about later. But then they do the outreach in their community with a survey. After they've done the survey, they present it at a community meeting. And these are taken from different community meetings. And this is this woman here was a leader of an organization called DISC, Developing Interracial Social Change. She's a Catholic who was involved with that group. This is the president of that organization down here. These are some of the people that worked on that community. These others were from Delray Beach. They were students. We partnered with a school. And when we partnered with the school and we sent the surveys home, we learned a key thing, which is if you have a place on your survey where you say other, or could you tell us what your primary concern is, and we have a list of things, and we say other. Well, one of the things we found out was fear of police. And we were able, they were working in a school that was Haitian Creole, helping Haitian Creole children who were not succeeding in English-speaking schools. And so we were able to connect with an officer who spoke Creole and was able to come and speak to the community because he's involved with the evacuation. We were concerned about the fear element of the first responders who have to go into the community and interact with people to help them evacuate. And we don't want people to be so fearful that they do not evacuate because people like this gentleman show up. So he was very good. He had a couple kids follow him out the door and ask him how they could become police officers, which was amazing. This gentleman is a fireman, and he was responsible in that community for the CERT program, and he spoke about the CERT program. So this is an asthma specialist. These others are, administrators at the school. The NIH supported us in Miami, our work in Miami, and here's their language that they have a community health mapping initiative that we did in Shorecrest, Miami. And their language is that community-based minority health organizations should be able to collect and maintain their own data rather than relying solely on national or state agencies or majority institution partners to provide data to them. So our language that we were using about empowering the community and showing that we are distributing and collecting health data put us on their radar. And therefore we ended up partnering with them. So this crowdsourcing of data, you see people standing in the water with their cell phones in some of the other slides, and they're uploading this information, and these are data points that have been generated from their cell phones. And in this particular map, the darkest color goes up to 17.3 inches. So you're seeing that they have at an intersection with a light, they have, they're dealing with over 17 inches of water. It's very hard on cars. These were taken over a period of time. So some of them, this is representing a range during the day of salinity at this spot, right? They might have a very low salinity between 0.5 and 5.25, parts per thousand at one time of day, and this is depth, inches. And at another time of day, they might have 17.3 inches. So that for the people who are going up to that corner, they have the ability to reroute themselves. If you'll see some of these other streets, if I know that it's going to be this bad on Northeast 10th Avenue at certain times of day, I will reroute myself. So the maps are useful. That's not the only thing we're mapping, but that was just an example. FEMA gave an award to this work in 2017 in the category of Community Preparedness Champions, honorable mention. And the language that they used showed us what they valued about our work. It was a trilingual outreach project that provided preparedness information to low-income, limited English proficiency households. And because we did that, that's why we were recognized. And it was extraordinary what the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Greater Naples did. Barbara Glasgow was the chair of the Green Sanctuary Committee, and they partnered with Habitat for Humanity of Collier County, and supporting them was the pastor from the Haitian Creole Church. And take a look at these numbers. Only 13% of households spoke only English. 50% of households spoke Creole and English. And 37% spoke Spanish and English. And we had in Boca Raton and Delray Beach created the templates for these outreach materials. And they of course, in every community, they have to change them. They have their own hurricane zones and shelters and other local contact information. But they needed it in all three languages, and they had a trilingual outreach team that did an amazing job. So we find alignment also in what city and county governments are putting out, because they've aligned with certain frameworks. So here, some communities are star communities. St. Petersburg, Florida is a star community. There is in their framework that, they get scores. I mean, one of the things I found out in doing this work is that people in municipal government like to get points and get awards. So they want to perform against these framework standards. And so the STAR community is a rating system, and they set goals to measure progress to improve their community. And so they're working on sustainability, and they have an equity and empowerment portion of the framework. And EE3 is environmental justice. If your community is a star community and you want to do an environmental justice project, they are someone you want to speak to about partnering, or what resources they have available that could, come to your party, or if your party can go to theirs. Okay, and then ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, has a goal of inclusive communities. They have, the city of West Palm Beach is an ICLEI local, affiliate, and they have, they are the ones who did a phenomenal job of partnering with us on being able to give things away, give incentives to people, have, resources that they had developed for outreach that could dovetail with what we were doing. The Rockefeller Foundation, they're a Resilient Cities initiative. Miami is one of them, and when we worked in Miami, they're working on addressing the needs of the most vulnerable. And this was a very helpful point of attachment. We partnered with both the city government and the county government. The Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy wants an inclusive, just, low-emission, and climate-resilient future that beats the Paris, goals. So if you are in a municipality that's aligned with this, you have possible partnering and support. In Florida Health, our department has a BRACE initiative, Building Resilience Against Climate Effects. The Rising Together project is extremely closely aligned with it. There's actually certain recommendations that I cite always that say, basically describe our project as being a need. But listen to their wording. Health outcomes disproportionately impact certain populations, including children, older adults, those living in poverty, those with underlying health conditions, and those living in certain higher risk geographic areas. So they're a resource for us. Their materials tend to be very close to ours. So I'm just saying, collaborate, 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 collaborate. I can't say it enough. Share, and how do you attract people? How do you get people to want to collaborate with your congregation? Share your resources to build relationships. That may be space. That may be sharing a link to their event on your Facebook page or on your website. It might be any number of things. You know what resources you have. Find resources that can be put to work in a partnering community. Okay, so some of those things I'll talk about in a culture of partnering and in a culture of collaboration. I'll get into that in a minute about what some of those skills are and some of those things. But you want to partner with organizations that are working to strengthen their communities. They don't have climate change written on their door. They may not have resilience or sustainability even in their anywhere in their vision or their mission, but they are in a minority community, or just a low-income community. And I've been told the word minority is offensive to some, and I'm really trying to discipline myself not to use it. But in a community that is low income and a community of color, there are very small organizations with very limited capacity that are doing extraordinary things to try to strengthen their communities, to try to raise their children up into leadership, to try to take care of traffic calming, to do whatever they can to work on getting drugs out of their community or crime out of their community. And these are people that their hearts are about strengthening their communities. So they're wonderful to partner with, because resilience is about strengthening their communities. And so you're looking, say, well, they don't know anything about climate and they're not interested in resilience or sustainability. That doesn't matter. They're interested in strengthening their communities. You can help by recruiting volunteers. You can help by recruiting sponsors. You can send letters of support. You can send letters of commitment for other people's projects. That's that part of that culture of collaboration. You can ask other people for letters of commitment, for contributions that align with their mission, and always deliver what you promise. And when you collaborate, here's a project at the beginning, this is who we are, where we have All Faiths Unitarian Congregation of Fort Myers partnering with the Dr. Ann Murphy Knight Stars Complex Community Forum, which is a group of people in the community working to try to solve the problems. And they're supported by us, our ministry, UUJF. We give them resources, we mentor them, we're working with them. And what does it turn out at the end? It turns out that we're working with all faiths. We have the climate leader, we have a project director from the fellowship or from the congregation. And then from our partner, we got a community committee chair, somebody from Goodwill, somebody from the Community Kids of Southwest Florida. We put together an outreach team of 6 folks, and then we had people who were supporting them from the community. We got a business that made office space and telephones available for people who were doing outreach and trying to get people to come to the meeting. And we got all of these government officials involved, the city manager, the councilwoman in Ward 1 and Ward 2 that were the wards that pertain, the city attorney, and the environmental manager at the Florida Department of Health. Like I said, we're very closely aligned with their BRACE initiative, so we can knock on the door of the Department of Health in the county and talk to them about what we're doing, and it fits with their mission. So when we support congregations to partner with low-income communities of color, this is what it looks like. These are some of the congregations that have been involved. These are some of the people. And I just want to say, who is talking to us? Who is asking us as a ministry to support them? Florida coastal congregations. They're in a coastal area. It's impacted by climate change. They're green sanctuary committees and teams. They're social action and social justice committees and teams. And they need resources. So it's grant writing assistance, and it's also partnering assistance. How can we help them partner with low-income communities of color? And so we provide communications tools, technical reporting assistance. We help them with PowerPoints of technical data and data they got from their surveys, printed materials that they can use and adapt, and we help with mentoring people along. And the reasons that people are asking us for the help is because they're going for certification or recertification with Green Sanctuary, and they're required to do an environmental justice project, or sometimes their social committee wants to do an environmental justice project. They've been hearing about it, they've been reading about it, they'd like to do a project in that area. And most recently, built on the capacity we've been building with Rising Together, we've been able to respond to crisis in the community using the bridge that we've formed from the congregation. We've been providing technical support. This is being able to measure the salinity, and we developed the field kits to be able to, people were afraid of, is there bacteria in the water? So we developed a standardized field kit to be able to determine if there was bacteria in the water, to take the salinity and to measure the depth and to upload it on cell phones, crowdsourced data. And so we've got the folks from the NIH, from the National Library of Medicine to come in. I mean, at this table, we have the people from the New Florida Majority organizers. We have 2 people from the NIH, National Library of Medicine Initiative. Here we have a professor from the Sea Level Rise Solutions out of FIU. And here we have a professor of journalism and communications who's working on this issue and being able to communicate about it. And they're sitting next to people from the low-income community here that are trying to learn about this. There were some people who came from Dubai who were sitting over here because Miami attracts people who are curious. But this is working with the people from the low-income community, giving them the skills that they need to go out in the field and to be able to take the measurements. We use, as much as we can, people from within the community who are skilled people to conduct the trainings, and she did a wonderful job. Okay, so this is what it looks like in the field. These were Quaker partners. The Southeastern Yearly Meeting partnered with us on the project. This is what it looks like. These are ones that are no bacteria coliform. These are the ones that are sequentially, they have more bacteria. And this was our very first test of being able to do this, and we had graduate students in here, and we had undergraduate students in here, the people from the NIH, the Quakers, all kinds of partners in the field, seeing how are we going to do this thing. Okay, I just want to say, when we look at any congregation, there's very different capacity in each congregation, and there's very different capacity in the communities that they get with. And people don't necessarily understand that they have capacity when they do. They say, oh, well, we're very small and we don't have much capacity. So I just want to say all these things are capacity that congregations have. Their relationships to elected officials, they can be a bridge. They can take people from a low-income community to meet somebody they know. The professionals they have who can help and volunteer things that people can't afford in the community where they live. You know, educated people who can help. Committee structure and a deliberative process. If you have a committee structure and a deliberative process, you have got capacity that you can build on. And then some exposure to the principles of environmental justice is extremely helpful. The business of thinking that you're going to go into a community and tell everybody how to make it right and show them how to do something doesn't work. So the people who have taken, you know, our place, you know, in the web of life, or have done, you know, a variety of different, you know, kind of small ministry studies, that's capacity. The ability to edit materials for print and to be able to sit with people and do deep listening to find out what is going to work and what is not going to work in their community if we're making it for outreach. Having a financial structure, having a treasurer, having a bank account, having an EIN number, having a DUNS number, this is all capacity that your congregation has. Having bylaws with a hiring policy is capacity needed if you're writing for grants. I mean, these things, if you're writing for grants, you need these things. Administrative and managerial skills, communications platforms, you have a website, you have a Facebook page. Even if the community does not have media literacy, having those things is extremely important when you're communicating on their behalf, so that you can post things and people can see what they're doing and decide that they want to come on board and support it with resources of some kind. So this is the thing that is amazing. These EJ projects, the specifically Rising Together projects, is creating capacity that I can't believe is able to support some of the things that are being asked of the capacity. Relationships are being built within a low-income community of color, between, you know, relationships within the community. People who were not speaking to each other before are speaking to each other and are finding the people who can translate for them, because immigrants moved in down the street and they don't speak to them. And we're finding people, so relationships within that community itself. Multicultural and multilingual project management skills, both in the community and in the congregation. Understanding how that works, how there's a face on it and what that looks like. The congregation has to start working across silos. They have to be able to, from the Green Sanctuary Committee, they have to work with the Social Justice Committee because they have connections to perhaps people who are in government, and the people who are having to do grant administration have those skills, are you know, people on the board. So there's more interaction between the Green Sanctuary and the board than there perhaps might not have been, and so forth. Also, capacity building is that the committee itself, whatever committee is doing this and trying to work in the community and coming back and trying to figure out who in their congregation is responsible for what, they understand better what the board is doing and what the governance plan is for their congregation. And then the institutional recognition from the community of UU congregations that are part of this nexus of climate, resilience, sustainability, emergency management. They know that you're in. They know you're a collaborator. People start reaching back to you, and you have to have those collaborative skills to reach back. So we've had these projects in Boca Raton, Delray Beach, and these other, they're all coastal locations. And the main takeaways that I have is that the local governments want to be engaged with these low-income communities of color that we're working in. Their best practices don't reach these audiences in many cases. They're not in the languages that are spoken. The people are running away from them because they're distrustful of them. So it's not reaching people, or people are marginalized in some way they can't get to the public meeting. Their best practice is to post the public meeting and to advertise the public meeting and then to hold the public meeting. Well, not everybody, number one, wants to go to a public meeting. Number two, not everybody has the ability to get there or the ability to understand the language of that meeting. So when we partner, we can help. We can translate things. We can walk door to door and give information to people that they need. In communities that are experiencing regular high tide flooding during the spring tides, need to have that information. Where are the places I can park that are going to be out of the flood? What times of day is it going to be flooding and to what extent? Where can I get flood supplies at a discount or free? Where can I get sandbags? Where will they be distributed? If those things are being distributed on social media and they're being on the web, there's so many people that it's not reaching, we can help. Okay, UU participants in an environmental justice work learn how and need to learn how to trust partners that they're looking at as somebody less than them in some ways because they're low income or because they're communities of color. There's mutual accountability. There are incredible things that you can count on people to do, and to respect the rhythm in the community, because something goes wrong and you think, oh, I have to jump in there and solve it. No, you don't. But you do have to be patient, because very often these communities have capacity to self-correct, but it's slow. It's just slow. People have to work. They don't have the time. You know, it takes time. Somebody's sick, whatever it is. You have to respect the rhythm of the community. So then as we're moving forward, there are doors that are being opened by these Rising Together projects at all levels. So locally, we're using the capacity that we've created with Rising Together right now to assist a community that's in crisis. And this is, I have another slide that I can speak to this about, but this is something that we're just starting to see that, my goodness, we built enough capacity to really be of help in a community environmental crisis. Locally, we're being asked to consult in dialogue about where there could be a resilience center in the community that would serve the target populations of underserved communities. We're being asked to bridge communications with local government. And at the regional level, in the planning that's taking place in Southeast Florida, we're being asked, and I participated on 3 committees as a stakeholder that was representing equity, the equity initiatives. In drafting language, they wanted 2 things. They wanted one section that dealt with equity, and then they wanted us to take a look at the equitability of language that was being created across the plan. And then at the state level, this community in crisis that we're working with, we have a letter of commitment from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection now to help with that community that's in crisis that we reached out for, and they reached back. And at the national level, we have had this support because these, and we do realize that this funding may dry up for a few years with the current administration, but the EPA, NOAA, NIH, National Library of Medicine, the FEMA, all of these organizations are tasked with reaching low-income communities that are very vulnerable and helping them build resilience. So there are grants. It's a bit of a do to do the grant writing process, but it is, some of it is specifically for faith communities to be involved. And at the international level, we've been asked to participate in these efforts that are, I call it democratization of data, simply because there's not much data in many of the communities that we're working with. And as the data is aggregated, people are using these as decision tools that inform them and keep them safe and more resilient. So we want to be able to, number one, collect the data that can be used to be able to help these people safe. And number two, to help figure out, how we can inform the citizenry that may or may not be able to use those tools at home. One of the things is, I never really thought about it until I got into this work, is how incredibly expensive data plans are when you're using a smartphone. So this kind of discussion is about, can we create resilience hubs, places where people can go, like libraries and similar hubs where they can learn about how to use these tools and apply them to figure out their risk where they live and to modify their behavior, make their own decisions about what they want to do to respond to what's going on in their community. So I'm going to finish with, these are the new directions. This first one, this environmental justice collaborative problem solving, is the community in crisis. This is in Fort Myers. It's a community called Dunbar. It's a community where the All Faiths Unitarian congregation that's in Fort Myers had partnered on a Rising Together project. And this past summer, they found out that between 1962 and 1992, the city had been dumping lime sludge from a waste water plant in their community, in an area that children had been playing in for years, and the levels of arsenic in it had been very high. The trust in this community, in the government that is supposed to be providing for their health and safety, has been shattered. And it's in crisis. It's a community in crisis. And we, because I had been, as a result of doing the $30,000 Rising Together pilot with the EPA's Environmental Justice Office, they have been sending me communications, and I had been, over the years attending, webinars and whatnot from their Environmental Justice Office that had trained me on a number of things. And one of them was about the existence of this collaborative problem solving grant, which requires you to reach across a minimum of 3 stakeholder groups. We reached across them all. We've got faith groups, government, health, and nonprofits and community-based organizations, all in the community. The African American community stepped up. There is a National Pan-Hellenic Council there of graduates of colleges that were in African American Greek organizations that has really been quite concerned and involved and helped us to attach to many other organizations. So the fact that the capacity that we built with Rising Together enabled us to pull in those people that we had on the other project reached out to. So we got the city manager on board. We got the council, the ward councilman on board in that community. And then we got the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. If we get the grant, the EPA will be helping to mediate. And then we got, I would say, I can't recall, maybe 8 or more nonprofits. We got an African American Friendship Missionary Baptist Church. So I think it's what's needed for healing. And it also brought in the clergy from All Faiths Unitarian congregation. Reverend CJ is there. And lucky for me, he had a Rising Together project when he was in West Palm Beach. And so now Reverend C.J. McGregor is in Fort Myers, and they're lucky to have him because he was very helpful in reaching out to the city and to the major health organizations. So the democratization of data I spoke with you about before, and that democratization of data is so important. It's really, the energy for this right now is out of Miami, but there is also energy, especially for the mapping piece of it, in the Tampa Bay area. So I'm working with universities in those areas to try to create projects that UUs can have a piece of those projects as an on-ramp. And then the hurricane preparedness, we're working, because we developed the capacity, we're working on a summer camp in low-income communities using, we don't know if we'll get it or not, but we're using an environmental education grant that's being offered by the EPA to work on understanding the water issues, the environmental issues, as well as understanding the infrastructure that we need to protect to keep us resilient and to keep our water safe. So it's an understanding of aquifers and watersheds, as well as water treatment plants and boil water orders and water contamination and flood and hurricane preparedness. And so we're working in the community with a large number of partners on that. And this may be the first county-wide initiative that I'm working on, and it may be involving multiple congregations. So that's all I have to say, and I just wanted to open it up to questions. Let me get back to the questions here that I was really interested in. So let me get out of this. Let me see here. How does this work? Why is my screen completely black? I don't know. Are you still looking at my screen?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll just tell you the questions that I kind of wanted to talk about were, one of them is, what local climate frameworks are being used in your community that align with UU values, you know, or STAR communities or any of those other things? And then how many congregations in your cluster do you know of that would like to do an environmental justice project, but they don't have the resources to do it? And then any institutional relationships that you might have with a community of color, just so we can kind of hear brainstorming about what those might be. And then, you know, what is going on in your cluster in the way of partnerships and collaborations that's not driven by a single individual, but in your congregation, you know, that it's across silos already.
All right. So first I'll say thank you so much, Jan. That was amazing and incredibly informative. And the work you're doing is just astonishingly impressive and really wonderful. So thank you so much. And everyone is muted, so it might take people a moment to get up the courage. But yeah, I think right now, y'all, we'll just keep as one big group. And if someone wants to share what's in response to Jan's question, please unmute yourself and give it a go.
Well, just to break the ice, we're out here in Whidbey Island, which is amazingly undiverse. And but we do have a Greening Congregations collaborative on the island that's doing great work in educating people about climate justice and some lobbying, mainly through emails. We do have a number of collaborative partners, including the Northwest UU Justice Network, 350.org. There are a number of groups in our region fighting all kinds of fossil fuel infrastructure, and too numerous to name. But we really don't have anything like you're describing, because we aren't quite there yet, having to face these immediate impacts of a changing world. We've had forest fires. We're seeing sea levels creep up. We've had mudslides and some flooding events, but we're kind of insulated up here. However, the community, and by that I mean Washington State, is in a position to be a leader. Legislatively, we've got tremendous potential. There are a number of bills moving through the legislature, the most significant of which is a carbon tax that directs the funds towards, among other things, adaptive strategies in communities of culture. I don't like using the term people of color, because that focuses on a superficial and somewhat negative aspect. I prefer people of culture, because they have culture, and this is all about an appreciation of diversity. But greatly appreciative and blown away by the work you guys are doing down there in Florida.
Thank you. The thing that I was aware of happening in Washington was there is a consortium of tribes in Washington that has a public health, has climate public health initiatives there. And yeah, it's wonderful. I'm glad, so happy to hear about the collaborations that you have, because they grow and they grow and they grow, and it's what makes you strong.
We work closely with the tribes in the region, and they are ahead of the curve on this in preparedness, primarily because there's no denialism there. They live so close to their resources that they see what's happening, and they don't suffer from the fantasy land background that Kurt Anderson describes in his book, Fantasyland. And so they're a real joy to work with, not only in Washington, but across the border. One of the infrastructure projects we're fighting is the Trans Mountain Pipeline, which would have devastating effects on the Salish Sea, what we here in Washington call the Puget Sound, and the life therein. So they're fossil fuel companies are having a very difficult time here.
Jan, would you mind repeating your question so that we can, I feel like they were all great questions and that might help us as a group.
Well, one of them is, how many congregations do you know of that would like to do an environmental justice project, but they don't have the resources to do so? So that a lot of times is, people in green sanctuary committees who are trying to figure out how they can do one. And then about, as he was just describing, the institutional relationships, that you have, because hearing what other people have, the collaborations and who they're working with can possibly inspire you to think of perhaps something you could, do as well. So what are those partners and collaborations you have that are institutional? There can be one person in your congregation running, doing something, but I mean the institutional ones that seem to resonate with the congregation. And then what are the local climate frameworks that are being used in your community? They don't necessarily say they're about climate. Sometimes there's sustainability ones. It's like the STAR and the ICLEI, and those. That's the hive. The hive is there. That's where you start to find partners. So I'm just wondering, what people have that's active in their community.
Well, hello. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much, Jan. I appreciate it so much. One of the things that we have is the Citizens Climate Lobby, which we have a few members that are interested in that. We also have people that are interested in animal justice, and that ties very well into climate change because of the amount of livestock and the methane and that sort of thing. Those are the two major groups. We occasionally have an Earth Day. This last 2 years, we've had somebody who's involved in Earth Day. So I'm wondering, I hadn't been wondering, but now that you asked it that way, you said a group that might be related. For instance, if we had a more formal, organized group about animal justice, and it's not about pet animal justice, but livestock animal justice, and we're doing this, number one, because the animals, but number two, because of climate, that's the impact it has. Would that fit in under the umbrella that you're thinking of? And the other thing is, in the town that I'm in, San Marcos has flooding issues due to the river. And so we have no preparing. People are just, left. FEMA does come in sometimes. But it occurred to me, there must be people that are working on this, but you mentioned an app that, let me see where I wrote it down, but an app that you had that kind of could do the street levels of how much flooding there is, and I'm wondering if that is something that, is already kind of going, that somebody could get and then modify for their city, or what could you tell me about that? Thanks.
This is a wonderful thing. It's called Fulcrum is the name of it, Fulcrum. If you're doing a project that's of a humanitarian nature, sometimes you can apply for a humanitarian account and not have an expense associated with it. It's extremely easy to use. It's a lot like Google Survey, if you've ever done that, where you can snap in different kinds of questions that you might ask, or a different thing that's for uploading a picture or for uploading a narrative that you just want to put in there. A place for whatever data you're collecting, you just snap it in there. It's going to be this many inches or centimeters or whatever, so that you can do that. It's uploaded into a spreadsheet that you can pull and do your analysis on and your reporting on.
Wow. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you can get on their website, Fulcrum, and you can see all the wonderful things that people are doing, because they can go to maps. And once you have maps, you can speak to people much more succinctly about a problem.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to give a testimonial. Jan has hit all the high points of a lot of years of work on her part, and ever increasing awareness of how to plug into local, state, and federal activities. We were one of the smaller of the churches in Florida. My name's Irene Keim. I live in Brooksville, Florida, which is about an hour north of Tampa, and our church is in Weeki Wachee. The town, I think, officially has 5 residents in Weeki Wachee. We are considered a rural county. The project that she designed, and we were not the first, so we had the benefit of everybody else testing out the materials. The project she designed was quite doable by a small group of people, because her project taught us the value of data and careful data and administering questionnaires with our community partner. I want to tell you to reinforce that this small project, well under $2,000, going out into the community. Let me tell you what I was listening to her, and I got to thinking about the impact that little project had, and it just had 3 church members working on it. We took the results to a community meeting that included commissioners, people from stormwater, people from mosquito control. You might not have that in your community. Those sorts of public officials showed up. And yes, they get national statistics on health, for example, on asthma, but having local statistics that confirm the national statistics had a lot more impact. It built some trust in the community, because stormwater was there and could show what they had done since the last major flooding in this neighborhood. And when Hurricane Irma dropped a lot of rain in our neighborhood, not a lot of devastation, but a lot of rain, That particular community did not have flooding because 2/3 of the stormwater project had been finished. So the community's faith in government was somewhat restored. Not totally, but somewhat. We have found that for our little church, it has built some links to groups that we felt were a bit impenetrable because we're a progressive church and this is a very conservative county. The director of EOC will not discuss climate change, will not use the terms, but was ready to talk about preparedness and flooding and all of that sort of stuff. This little project that was easy to do because Jan and people who went before us had worked out basic requirements for wording and for handouts and for data gathering. It just had really strong impact on our neighborhood, and we aren't finished mining that yet. Talk to me again in about 6 months when we get finished with the EJPN portal in Ministry for Earth, and I can spend more time on it. And I think I'll be able to tell you that it just did great things. And there's one sort of funny incident because the statistics we provided are associated with me and with my husband, Bob, who is a volunteer chaplain in our little church. When we go to a meeting that has a predominance of progressive people, we are embarrassed that they ask us to stand up and they recognize us as honored guests. I'm just floored by that response to clear numbers and explanations of the survey we did. No one else had ever done anything like that in this rural county. So I'm here to say that, yes, Jan has gone on to deeper and better work on some very serious issues. Oh, there's one other thing I forgot. The statistics on asthma have a secondary power in that there's a group fighting a extension of mining and strengthening of cogeneration power using coal by a Mexican company that owns 2,000 acres in this county. And that statistic about asthma was used as one of about 10 points to successfully get the local planning commission to vote down an extension of that mine by 765 acres. Now it has to go through the county commission. And if the county commission approves it, we have Koch money in this rural county. If the county commission approves it, perhaps we've empowered some of those women who have stepped forward and are running for office next fall. And we may see a flipping of our local county commission over this one issue. And it was that statistic on asthma that has gotten people excited about this 5th dirtiest coal plant in the state of Florida, which is right here in this county. So that's my testimonial. Like I said, as I heard Jan going through the major points and the impacts, that's a real picture of what those bullet points meant to this community. And like I said, check back next autumn and let's see how much more impact it's had here.
Yeah, and I want to just lift up how incredible the whole way of describing what partnering and collaboration is all about, and also what it does for both for using congregational capacity and building congregational capacity. And I have never heard such a thorough explanation of how this whole environmental justice, working with communities in collaboration, and so many elements, including UU values. So thank you, Jan. It was just really powerful and so useful in terms of going beyond the specifics of the incredible Florida work, but how partnerships and collaborations and really being thoughtful about how it all fits together. So thank you.
You're welcome. I want to give everybody a tool I didn't mention. Yes, Fulcrum is really great for being able to crowdsource data. If you need to establish that a community has an environmental justice need, the new EJ screen tool that the EPA has put together is really wonderful. And I used to be mining social vulnerability indexes and cross-referencing that with physical other things that were on other tools, but that EJ screen combines the demographics with the air quality and the water quality and a number of other things. So check it out.
I'm holding back a little bit, and if somebody else is just on the edge of asking a question or making a comment, I'd like to wait until.
Well, then, okay, I just want to ask to clarify this last thing. Thank you very much, EJ. Environmental justice from EPA. Where do I look for that tool?
Google EJSCREEN. EJSCREEN.
Screen.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
And it should bring it up, and there's information about how to use the tool.
Thank you.
Well, I will grab the mic for just a moment. Jan, what do you do for pay? Assuming all of this is volunteer in your spare time. What kind of work do you do? Is it relevant in some carryover way to this good stuff?
Well, my husband and I are kind of like semi-retired people, but I am still I do online tutoring, and I develop tools for people who are moving into our education system from other countries. And so I develop online tools. So to the sense that I'm accustomed to working online with collaborative formats really has helped a lot in interacting with other people in collaborating. Various collaboration tools that are available online, and being able to develop materials that kind of help people go from where they are to the next step, and help work in these multilingual environments that we're working in. So that's all very helpful. So we have our own business that I'm doing that. I do online tutoring and that sort of thing. But I am also writing in pieces for myself. I freely give my grant writing work, which is very time consuming, but I write a piece in the grant now for my continued involvement with each of the projects, because it became so time consuming that I just couldn't offer that much time. But like, you don't happen to be
an ex-Peace Corps volunteer, are you?
No.
International. I am. Anyway.
But I do speak French, German, and Italian, and it helps me in the communities. I can speak French with the people who are Haitian Creole for the most part, and I understand a lot of, how when you walk in somewhere, if I go somewhere and the people around me are speaking a language I don't know, I feel a little disoriented.
Yeah.
But if I'm in a community where I'm conversant in a related language, I can usually pick up on things that are going on. So I feel very comfortable, and I don't really need people to translate for me, which helps.
Well, as you get older, you can join the Peace Corps at any time. The oldest person who ever did was a woman who joined at age 83. And the world would benefit from your friendliness and capacity. I'm curious about the penetration of digital devices in the very poor communities that you're working with. Are there cell phones that I would somehow guess, in spite of the low levels of income, people can get on the web and talk by phone? True?
Yeah, it's very different. It's a huge challenge, okay? When we do data collection in the field, we partner graduate students from the local university with residents or us, like the Quakers and the UUs in the field. And sometimes they have smartphones, but they don't want the data charges. And so there's also the phones that they're using in many cases. I mean, people hand you a phone and they say, oh, could you put it in my phone? Well, the phones are not up-to-date smartphones that we might be carrying around on the kinds of plans that we have. So even getting them registered for code red in their own phone, you know, you have to be very patient, and you just really have to try to understand the limitations of the actual device that they have. Many people don't have the phones at all. And this is part of the huge problem in coastal Florida, because that's what the government's best practices. They're using the tools, they're trying to get these interactive things in everybody's hands. So you're walking along and you want to know where it's safe to go, and you can, you know, that this is the goal of them. Well, you know, we have a whole population that's excluded from it. And so it's a challenge, and it's a group challenge, and the people who are in the position of whatever, you know, they're not necessarily primitive, but, you know, these devices that are not as capable need to have a voice in saying, yes, but I can receive, you know, Amber Alerts. I can receive these other things. So how can you make it similar to what my phone can handle? And of course it will change over time. But there's a real problem about being able to afford the device and being able to afford the data plans.
As an example of not only the digital divide, one of the projects Jan was doing, you saw, was testing water in Dade County at high tide, King High Tide. We've all heard of that, especially October. The people they were asking to do the testing didn't have the money for waders that would keep them safe. We would think nothing of it, run down to Walmart and get a pair of waders so that we wouldn't be at risk, right? They didn't have that kind of money. So the southern region gave us a grant to buy boots. It's probably the only grant they've ever done to buy boots, but it is something to think about. You bring up the digital divide, that economic injustice that's happening has a lot of ramifications.
And this goes to my transformation over time being involved in this work. Is the beginning, I was thinking, you know, it's basically your neighborhood where you live. Resilience is going to be less if it's in an impoverished community than if it's in a community with more resources. And I read that and I think that, and I think I know that. And then I go into a community that has a low income apartment that's next to homes that are $600,000 to $800,000. And the people who are in the low income community are suffering horribly. And the people who are in the homes are, you know, well, maybe when you're finished, you go over, we'll give you. So they've recovered very, very quickly from Hurricane Irma, whereas the people who were on the first floor of the low-income apartments were in total crisis. It's not where you live, it's how much money you have.
Jan, first of all, a terrific presentation. Thank you so much. I really learned a lot. I'm wondering to what degree you've been able to do advocacy or lobbying at the state level, and how you involve the communities as storytellers, as advocates. I think you used the word communicating on their behalf. We at the federal level try to, as Susan Frederick Gray reminded us, not speak on their behalf so much as to amplify the voices. And from time to time, we've been able to have, for example, Dreamers come along with us to meet with members of Congress and the like. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you do state level advocacy and how you convey the value of the community participation and how persuasive that can be or not?
Well, because, okay, so okay, let me back up. when I worked with the DART organization, we worked very hard to have witness, or to have people who were from the community who could do witness. I don't work in these communities with anybody who can afford to travel. Like they were saying last year, can you bring people, can some of them come to GA? They can't afford to go to GA, and they had no budget for it. So no, they will not be there. It's the same thing with going to see the legislators. When I don't have the time, because I'm working all over coastal Florida, I haven't worked with a group yet that has the capacity to continue on in advocacy locally. I do have people in the communities who have the ability to get online, who I'm working with in that regard. So we have the SALSA system that can send out action alerts that are when there are initiatives that are relevant to their community, and I can let them know, and they can participate in that kind of slacktivist activity. But one of the things that I don't have the time to do, but I may eventually do it, and I have been talking to some people who are interested in it. I have so much, and the answer to your question is, when I go and speak to the legislators, I have these reports that I make out of every one of these surveys that we transcribe what people have said, and we make that available. So when we speak about the fact that there is flooding legislation, we have a chart of people from their district and things that they said from the low-income communities, which is input that they wouldn't otherwise have. So it is what they said, it's what they responded on the survey. We can characterize what community they're from, what street they're on, and say, these are people in your district, they're from these streets, and here are their words from the surveys. That's the best that I can do right now. I would love to be able to have, I think that we can make national advocacy material out of the kind of stories that people have been telling us. I have videos that I've been taking of oral histories that I cooperated with people on, and researchers have been using them, but they have not been turned into advocacy tools. I tried to get a grant for that through, was it the Rockefeller people last year, but it didn't go through.
Jan, thank you so very much for your time and your wisdom and sharing it with us tonight. And we need to wrap up, but I wanted to say thank you so much, and I will definitely take away a lot of what you've said, and also do my best to share this video with as many UUs as possible who are passionate about this, because it's very inspiring. And so to just wrap up, I think anyone who wants to share just a sentence or a few words as you're saying goodnight, please do so. And the mute and unmute is in the bottom left corner, and we'll just say goodnight and say thank you. Either just drop off quietly, or feel free to say a thank you and what you carry with you.
My wife and I highly recommend that everybody go see the movie Black Panther.
Thanks, Jeb.
Well, thank you very, very much. This is just amazing, very inspiring.
Thank you.
This is Doug Hunt in Pennsylvania, and I highly recommend that everyone stay safe.
Also, to say I'm willing to stay on for the Green Sanctuary person who had
Thank
questions.
You. Very good, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan from Massachusetts. And I can stay on for a little bit for Green Sanctuary.
Good to hear about your success. It's very exciting, and I've gotten some useful information. Thank you very much.
Jan, thank you also from Texas here. One of the things, having just stepped into the Green Sanctuary group at my church, one of the things I have a burning desire to know now is what all the other churches in my cluster, there are 9 UU churches, but I would like to go outside of that to other churches in the area and there are plenty down here, to find out what they are doing. I don't know, and I want to know. So thank you for that one little push, and thank you for your presentation.
You know, thinking about other churches, I do want to encourage you to check with your Muslim groups in your area. We find that in this rural area, they are very progressive around health needs, around sustainable food, and around homelessness.
Thank you for that, Irene. I will do that. We've been in contact with them in other ways.
And we here in Washington, Seattle, and the area built an interfaith justice action team, climate justice action team. I can send you a link to that. One of the things that we're doing is inviting pastors, clergy, and faith-based leaders to a luncheon to discuss climate justice as a way of reaching out and demonstrating to them that there are people in their area interested in this, and to give them some ideas. I'd also piggyback on the gentleman who Black Panthered us to say there's an exciting shorts movie up for an Academy Award called Knife Skills. That's about lifting up convicts by teaching them how to be chefs. It's a very exciting film. Check it out. Nice.
Thank you for shouting that out. It's right in my neighborhood and restaurant we go to, and he's an amazing guy. So yeah.
All right. Well, yep, that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ollie.
Thank you. Good night.